He was a 15-year-old honor student, a Boy Scout, and by morning, his entire family was dead, leaving one question behind. How did Nicholas Browning go from sleeping at a friend's house to becoming the only survivor of a massacre inside his own home? The night of the sleepover. Nicholas Browning was 15 years old when he murdered his entire immediate family. He was born in Maryland on February 9, 1992, and was described as a good boy and a hardworking student. His father, John Browning, was a successful business attorney. His mother, Tamara Browning, was actively involved in raising their children. His younger brothers, Benjamin and Gregory, were still asleep in their beds when their lives were taken. John Browning had worked in Baltimore County's oldest law firm for nearly 20 years. He was a scoutmaster and a church leader. Nicholas, who was tall and gangly, was working toward becoming an Eagle Scout and had built a prayer garden at his church to meet one of the requirements. His high school was one of the best in the county. Browning led camping, rock climbing, and whitewater expeditions for his Boy Scout troop. The family also hosted meetings for Scouts' parents at their home. From the outside, the Browning family looked stable, educated, and secure, living in a quiet neighborhood where violent crime was rare and neighbors trusted one another. On the evening of Friday, February 1st, 2008, a week before his 16th birthday, the night before the murders, Nicholas was dropped off at a friend's house for a sleepover. His friends, Taylor Tewksbury and Alexander Smith, were to stay the night with Ryan. The boys were all 15 years old. He spent the evening playing video games and watching movies with friends, behaving in a way that gave no outward indication of what was about to happen. Sometime after midnight, Nicholas left the house under the excuse that he was going to sneak home and retrieve his car so the group could go for a drive. That detail would later become one of the most important pieces of the investigation, because Nicholas was gone for several hours during the exact window when his family was killed. By morning, Nicholas returned to his friends as if nothing had happened. Instead of going straight home when his parents did not answer his calls, he went to the mall with his friends, including Ryan's father. After shopping, they took Nicholas home. On the way there, he repeatedly called his mother and father and sent them text messages, but to no avail. Only later did the group head back to the Browning house, where the scene they encountered would immediately raise questions. They immediately noticed the family car in the driveway, but the house was quiet. The front door was unlocked. John Browning was found dead on the couch, shot in the head. Upstairs, Tamara Browning and the two younger boys were discovered in their beds, each killed by gunshots while they slept. After the slayings, he threw the gun away in bushes near his house. Authorities said friends dropped Nicholas off on Saturday, and soon after, he came out of the house to say he had found his father's body on the ground floor. He then called 911. A caller reported to 911 that a 45-year-old male was lying on the couch with blood coming out of his nose and he was not breathing. Shortly before 5 p.m., officers found Nicholas's father dead in a ground floor room and his mother and brother's bodies in upstairs bedrooms. They also found the gun. The victims were John, 45, Tamara, 44, Gregory, 13, and Benjamin, 11. Nicholas, who seemed calm, told police that the murders must have been the result of a burglary, yet nothing of value had been taken. He was so sure of that while he was staying with his friends. Game consoles sat untouched in the basement. No signs of forced entry were found. As detectives began separating and questioning the teenagers, inconsistencies emerged almost immediately. Nicholas's friends gave conflicting accounts of when he left the house, how long he was gone, and whether he had access to his car or his house keys. Each interview seemed to tighten the focus on Nicholas himself. The police spoke to Taylor first. He immediately seemed suspicious of the police because he was nervous. He spoke hesitantly before answering questions. The police chose him first because they thought the boy would be easy to crack. According to Taylor, he and 3 of his friends had spent the night at Ryan's house. They arrived the day before the murder shortly after school with Ryan, while Alex and Nicholas arrived a little later. The teens watched movies and played video games until late. Until Ryan's parents sent everyone to bed. During the night, he didn't see or hear anything suspicious. After that, the investigating officer, who was working with Taylor, decided to take a break and talk to Nicholas in another room. The police officer wanted to portray this interaction as a normal witness interview so that the teen would trust him. Nicholas said that he came home from school at around 2:45 p.m. After a while, his parents decided to take him to Ryan's house. The teenagers lived less than a kilometer from each other, so they usually walked to each other's houses. This time, the Brownings decided to take him with them, simply because they happened to be out and about. Nicholas repeated Taylor's story that he spent the whole evening playing computer games and watching films, then went to bed. He admitted, however, that he left his friend's house at around 1 a.m. and headed towards his parents' house. According to him, he wanted to steal the family car to go for a drive with his friends. Obviously, his parents were not allowed to know about it. When he reached the house, he saw the lights were on in his father and mother's bedroom. At that moment, he had already gotten into the car. He lay down on the floor of the back seat, so he could not be seen. Nicholas was worried that his action of opening the car would make noise and attract his parents' attention, but he did not want to be reprimanded by his strict father, so he held still. Now he had to wait until the family had calmed down and everyone had gone to bed. He didn't want to steal the car in public so as to not provoke more trouble. Nicholas lay in the family car for a while and just fell asleep. Probably then, the shooting started. He just didn't hear it. He woke up and drove away. The officers then spoke to Ryan. According to him, he had dozed off in the evening and woke up around midnight. According to him, Nicholas was no longer at home at that time. The investigators, then, came across a temporal discrepancy, which could also indicate that the teenagers were lying. Due to the obvious discrepancy, the investigators turned to Taylor again for clarification. The investigators stated that Nicholas was actually no longer in Ryan's house around midnight. When Taylor was then informed about the time periods given by the other teenagers, he immediately changed his statements. He now claimed that Nicholas was still in the house at midnight. Taylor was visibly more nervous and did not want to tell the truth so as not to incriminate his friend. The officer managed to calm the teen down. Taylor said that after Nicholas left, he went straight to bed. Taylor knew that his friend wanted to steal his parents' car and go for a drive, but did not indicate that he was stuck in it or even attacked the family. The investigators then spoke to Nicholas again, who presented the friend's new statement. He claimed now that he had woken up by a call from Alex, his friend, that he had received at around 5 a.m. He went back to his friend's house without the car. What struck investigators most was not just the contradictions, but Nicholas's demeanor. While describing the discovery of his murdered family, he showed little emotion. He asked for food during interrogation, ate calmly, and even fell asleep while handcuffed to a pipe. To seasoned detectives, this detachment felt deeply abnormal, given the circumstances. As the interrogation continued, detectives uncovered critical details that Nicholas had initially denied. He admitted that he had called his younger brother the night before and asked him to leave the basement door unlocked. He was familiar with his father's firearms and knew where a handgun was kept. When pressed about the gun locker keys, Nicholas made statements that suggested knowledge only the killer would have, including referencing that the gun was already out, even though he had previously claimed he was not inside the house at the time of the murders. Then a man came to the station who played a key role in solving the crime. It was Mr. Pat, who was Ryan's stepfather, stayed overnight with Ryan's friends. The man said that the children should be picked up by their parents at 9 a.m. because the mother wanted to involve her son in cleaning the house, but no one came at the agreed time and didn't call. Ryan's stepfather also said that Nicholas was unusually calm, wasn't worried about his parents' absence in the morning, and for some reason didn't rush home himself even though he only had to work 20 minutes. The police saw in this behavior a confirmation of their suspicions. The murderer simply didn't want to return to the crime scene and wanted to gain time. Nicholas himself believed that not too far from the Browning family lived a man who was really capable of such a bloodbath. It was a neighbor named Bobby who consumed illegal substances and repeatedly got into trouble with the law. The investigators, however, thought this was just an attempt to shift the blame onto someone else and divert suspicion from himself. There was no evidence against Bobby, and he had a solid alibi. When the investigators asked about other questions, Nicholas continued to insist on his innocence. The police pressed him again and again. The longer it took, the more the young man's statement changed. During the investigation, it turned out that the parents' relationship with their eldest son, Nicholas, was not the best. Recently, it has become even more tense. When he realized that he was being cornered, the main suspect said that his parents were very cruel people. He had been subjected to their moral and physical pressure for years. During the interrogation, Nicholas repeatedly asked the police whether he could expect compulsory treatment in a psychiatric hospital instead of a life sentence. The investigators avoided answering this question, but the boy's suspicious interest was held against Nicholas. He was obviously aware of his guilt and thought that it was a chance of reducing the sentence. He was still sure that the jury would believe his story, which he openly told the investigators at the end of the interrogation. The evidence against Nicholas was sufficient, but there was no motive. According to the suspect's friends, Nicholas had a fight with his father shortly before the murders. He eventually described incidents in which his father was rude to him and even physically attacked him. In the fall, the relationship had deteriorated significantly. One of the reasons for this was the situation when the boy stole the family car and was caught. The transition had a bad effect on Nicholas. His behavior got worse and worse, which, of course, the teenager's parents did not like. The father was quite strict and tried to re-educate his son. Nicholas himself claimed that according to his statement on the day he went to his friends, it always came to a critical point because his father beat him up again that morning for far-fetched reasons. The police suspected that the reason for the whipping was that the teenager did not want to obey his parents. From the statements of his friends, it emerged that the boy was in his teens and was beginning to show a rebellious spirit which was met with natural resistance from his parents. Particularly great tensions arose after his father had caught his son drinking alcohol several times. Nicholas himself justified himself by saying that he was trying to get away from his problems in this way. The confession. Eventually, after hours of questioning, Nicholas confessed. He admitted that he returned home that night, saw his father asleep on the couch, retrieved the gun, and sat with it for nearly 30 minutes before pulling the trigger. He then realized he had already gone so far. He then went upstairs and shot his mother and his brothers as they slept. When asked why he killed his siblings, Nicholas said they would not have been able to help him keep his story straight, and he was afraid. Nicholas showed the police where he had hidden the weapon. The murder weapon was found in a bush on the property. Holistic tests showed that it was the weapon which killed the family, and the barrel contained DNA samples from the suspect. Despite a confession, police say they still have no motive for why Dulaney High School sophomore Nicholas Browning allegedly killed his parents and two brothers as they slept Friday night. While police say the teen had been arguing with his father, he did not have a confrontation with his dad that night. Police may be confused by the boy's actions, but students who rode the school bus with Browning say the teen recently began talking about killing his parents, but none of them took him seriously. A middle schooler said that Nicholas talked about how rich his father was and how he wanted some of that money. The student further said that Nicholas didn't like his father because he used to always yell at him and stuff, and that he called his mom a ditzy, dumb blonde. They thought he was kidding. The student said Nicholas Browning used to pick on his younger brothers on the bus and would punch Gregory when he wouldn't listen. In addition, it was found that he also allowed himself to do unnecessary things to people outside his immediate circle. In particular, he bullied young students and people with disabilities at school. But some students said that Nicholas Browning appeared completely normal at school. Meanwhile, more than 600 people have joined an internet group on Facebook honoring the family. A prayer service for the Brownings was scheduled for 6:30 Wednesday night at Church of the Nativity on Ridgely Road in Timonium. Nicholas claimed his motive was long-term physical and emotional abuse by his father. He described being hit, belittled, and humiliated, including being called degrading names and being punished harshly over grades and behavior. Some family members later supported parts of this claim, while prosecutors argued that whatever conflict existed did not justify a calculated execution of 4 sleeping people. The tall, gangly sophomore at Dulaney in neighboring Timonium was denied bail. He was being held at the Baltimore County Detention Center in a special section for juveniles. While waiting for the trial just 2 days before it began, Nick was in custody and had a telephone conversation with his friend. Of course, the conversation was taped. During the conversation, the teenager joked about his escape. He never seemed to show remorse or realize the extent of his guilt. At the hearing, however, the situation changed dramatically. In a meeting with investigators, the teenager showed no psychological abnormalities. He had no mental problems at an earlier age, no disorders, and no thoughts of giving up his life. At the same time, his lawyer insisted that Nick be placed in a psychiatric facility with a rehab program. The juvenile offender should be placed in a home. The defense attorney was of the opinion that none of the teenager's motives sounded convincing. Even if there was money involved, he couldn't get it until he was of legal age. Furthermore, in that case, Nicholas would end up in a children's home or a foster family. Obviously, he didn't realize that the situation in this case could have been even worse for him than for the teenager he had described in his report on domestic violence in the family. However, a psychiatric report found that the teenager was of sound mind. In court, the attorney could not now claim mental impairment, since such crimes are punishable by death under state law. No life was at stake. He was too young to receive the death penalty. Prosecutors requested the 4 life terms for Nicholas Browning after he pleaded guilty in October. However, the defense attorneys offered their explanation, saying the killings were the result of years of abuse suffered by Nicholas at the hands of his alcoholic father. Browning's relatives, including his grandparents, aunts and uncles, stood behind him. Several wrote letters asking Baltimore County Circuit Judge Thomas Bollinger to show leniency and backing up claims that Browning was abused by his parents. Attorney Leo Ryan Jr. said that the abuse allegations did not explain why Browning would kill his younger brothers. Prosecutors played portions of a police interview in which Browning, who at the time claimed innocence, said a big inheritance and life insurance payments were coming his way. Judge Thomas Bollinger rejected that request but recommended that Browning be referred to the Patuxent Institution, a psychiatric center with a program for youthful offenders. In January 2009, Nicholas Browning pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 4 life terms, 2 to be served consecutively by Judge Thomas Bollinger. Because he was a juvenile at the time of the crime, he became eligible for parole after serving 23 years, with his first possible review set decades into the future. In Browning's statement, read aloud by defense attorney Joshua Treem, the teen thanked his relatives for showing him unconditional love and said he was thinking only of himself at the time of the killings. More than 15 years later, the Browning case remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying crimes do not come from strangers in the dark, but from inside the home, carried out by someone everyone believed they knew.